It was early evening, that quiet time of day when the sun begins to fall behind the houses and the streetlights start to blink awake. The sky had that soft orange color that makes everything feel calm for a moment. The boy was driving home after basketball practice, the air still warm from a long day. His backpack was tossed on the seat beside him, his jersey damp with sweat and his mind somewhere between tired and proud. Practice had gone well. He'd scored, he'd hustled, and his coach had told him he was improving every week. For a 17-year-old, that meant everything. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't playing loud music, just driving his old car down the familiar street that led to home. The radio hummed quietly, playing a soft R&B song, and his hands stayed at 10 and 2 on the wheel, just like his father had taught him. He was thinking about dinner, maybe what show he'd watch before finishing homework. Nothing special, nothing dramatic. Just another ordinary evening. Then the red and blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror. At first he thought maybe the police car was heading somewhere else. Maybe there was an emergency. Maybe someone needed help. But as he slowed and pulled slightly to the right, the lights followed him. The short burst of a siren confirmed it. They wanted him to stop. His stomach sank. He signaled, slowed down completely, and pulled to the curb. He could feel his heartbeat picking up. His father had always told him what to do in moments like this. Stay calm, be polite, no sudden moves. He knew the talk. Every young man in his community did. Still, knowing it didn't stop the nervous, shake in his hands or the cold wave of worry that washed over his body. He rolled down the window halfway and waited. The police car stopped behind him, its lights still flashing across the empty street. The air felt heavier. It was quiet except for the faint buzz of the engine. He could see in his side mirror that 2 officers were inside. They stayed there for a long moment, talking before one finally stepped out. The officer walked slowly toward his window. The boy kept his hands on the wheel, just as he'd been taught. "Good evening, officer," he said quietly. The man didn't answer at first. His flashlight moved across the car, shining into the back seat, across the boy's lap, and finally up to his face. "License and registration," the officer said. "Yes, sir," the boy replied. "It's in my wallet right here." He pointed carefully toward the pocket of the door where his wallet rested. The officer didn't say anything, just watched. The silence made every second feel longer. He handed over his license and registration, trying to keep his breathing even. "Did I do something wrong, officer?" The man finally answered. "Your taillight's out." The boy blinked. "Oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry, sir. I can get it fixed tomorrow." The officer didn't respond to that either. He looked at the license, then glanced at the boy again, studying him. The light stayed in his eyes longer than it needed to. "You live around here?" "Yes, sir. Just a few streets down." The officer nodded slowly but didn't look convinced. "Step out of the vehicle." The words made his chest tighten. "Sir?" "Step out of the car." He unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the door, and stepped out. The cool evening air hit his face. The street was empty, just the glow of the police car lights bouncing off the houses and parked cars. The second officer had come out by now, standing a few feet behind the first one, watching. The boy kept his hands visible. "Is everything okay, sir?" "Just a routine check," the first officer said, though his tone didn't sound friendly or calm. The boy nodded. "Yes, sir." He stood there, trying not to fidget, trying to remember to breathe. His mind was spinning with thoughts of what his father would say, how he'd told him never to argue, never to act afraid, never to lose his temper. Just stay respectful, always. The officer walked around the car, shining the flashlight again inside. The boy could hear the sound of his shoes scraping the pavement, the radio crackling faintly from the police car. "Where you coming from?" "Basketball practice, sir." "Where's that?" "Lincoln High." The officer gave a short hum, still looking through the window of the car. "Got anything in here I should know about?" "No, sir. Just my bag and some books." The second officer walked closer now, his hand resting near his belt. He was younger, maybe in his 30s, his expression unreadable. "You sure about that?" he asked. "Yes, sir." The first officer opened the back door and glanced inside. The boy stood perfectly still, afraid any movement would make things worse. His mind kept repeating, "Don't move, don't react, don't talk unless spoken to." A few seconds later, the officer shut the door again and walked back to him. "You in a hurry or something?" "No, sir, just heading home." The officer stared at him for a moment that felt endless. Then he said, "You nervous?" The boy swallowed. "A little, sir." "Why's that?" He hesitated. I've never been stopped before." The officer looked at him, his expression hard to read. Then he nodded slightly, as if deciding something, and said, "Wait here." He went back to the police car, talking to his partner through the open window. The boy could see them glancing at him, could see the faint movement of their lips as they spoke. The longer it went on, the more his worry grew. He wasn't sure if he should sit back in his car or stay standing. He chose to stay where he was, his hands visible, his voice quiet. He thought about calling his father, not because he wanted to get out of trouble, but because hearing his father's voice always made him feel steady. His father was a man of reason, calm under pressure, the kind of person people listened to, but the boy didn't want to seem disrespectful or impatient. He'd wait. The radio in the police car crackled again, some message he couldn't make out. The two officers stepped out again. The older one had his flashlight still on. The younger one had a small notepad. "You said you live around here, right?" the older one asked. "Yes, sir." "What street?" "Maple Avenue, just past the park." The man wrote something down. "You got any friends around here?" "Yes, sir. I go to school with—" "Never mind," the man interrupted. The boy fell silent. He could feel his heart still racing, not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he didn't understand what was happening. Why were they asking so many questions for a broken light? He tried to tell himself not to think too much, that maybe this was just how it went. Minutes passed. The sound of distant cars came and went. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The lights from the patrol car flickered across his face, and he wished he were home. Finally, the officer handed his license back. "You should get that light fixed." "Yes, sir, I will." "Thank you." But the man didn't leave. He stood there studying the boy again. "You said your dad's around here too?" "Yes, sir." "What does he do?" "He works for the city," the boy said softly. The officer nodded again, then looked at his partner. "All right, you can go." The boy blinked, uncertain for a second. "Thank you, sir." He opened his car door carefully, sat back down, and closed it gently. His hands were trembling slightly. He started the engine, checked his mirrors, and waited until they signaled him to move. As he drove off slowly, he could still feel their eyes on him. The street ahead looked the same as always, but it felt different now, quieter, heavier. His chest hurt a little from how tight he'd been holding his breath. He let it out slowly, one shaky sigh. A few minutes later, he turned onto Maple Avenue. The familiar houses came into view, the old oak tree at the corner, the porch lights flickering on as the night settled. He finally pulled into his driveway and parked. He sat there for a moment, the engine off, his hands resting on the wheel. The silence felt strange after the flashing lights and voices. His phone buzzed, a message from his father asking if he was on his way home. He typed back, "Yes, just got here." He didn't mention what happened, not yet. He needed a moment to process it. He took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, stretching his stiff arms. The night air felt cooler now, almost gentle. Inside the house, the smell of dinner filled the air. Baked chicken and mashed potatoes, his favorite. His mother looked up from the kitchen. "Hey, sweetheart, how was practice?" He smiled, a small one. "It was good, Mom." "Your dad's still in his office," she said, nodding toward the hallway. "Go wash up. Dinner's ready soon." He nodded and went down the hall. The familiar sound of his father typing on the keyboard behind the half-open door. For a moment, he almost told him everything right then. But he stopped himself. His father had long days, and the boy didn't want to worry him over something that was technically nothing. A broken taillight. A stop. That's all it was. Right? Still, when he looked in the mirror while washing his hands, he noticed the slight redness around his wrists where the officer had grabbed his arm to guide him away from the car. Not rough enough to bruise, but enough to leave a mark. He stared at it for a moment, feeling that strange mix of anger and sadness. He shook his head, dried his hands, and went to eat dinner with his family. The conversation was light. His mother asked about school, his father reminded him about college applications, and he tried to act normal. But later that night, when everyone was asleep, he sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the glow of the streetlight outside his window. He could still see those flashing red and blue lights in his mind, still hear the tone of the officer's voice. He picked up his phone, thinking again about how close he'd come to calling his father right there on the street. He wondered what would have happened if he had. Would things have gone differently? Would they have believed him faster? Or would they have thought he was trying to show off? He didn't know. He only knew one thing, that feeling of being small, of being treated like you were something suspicious just for existing, had sunk into him deeper than he wanted to admit. He set the phone down, lay back, and stared at the ceiling. The house was quiet, safe, he was home, but that didn't stop the uneasy thought that maybe next time it wouldn't be so simple. For now, though, he tried to focus on the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the distant sound of a car passing, the ordinary rhythm of life that told him everything was okay, at least for tonight. He closed his eyes and told himself it was over. But deep down, a part of him knew it wasn't. Something about that encounter had shifted something inside him, something that wouldn't quite go back to normal. The next day would come. The sun would rise again and life would move forward, but the memory of those flashing lights, that heavy silence, and the fear that crept into his chest would stay with him. Quiet. Invisible but very real, and somewhere down the line, that one night would be the beginning of something much bigger. Something he couldn't yet see. The morning light slipped through the curtains, painting soft golden stripes across the room. The boy woke up slowly, blinking at the sunlight on his wall. For a moment, he forgot about the night before. Everything felt calm. Birds outside, faint noise of the TV from the living room, the smell of coffee. But when he sat up, that uneasy memory rushed back. The flashing lights, the sharp voice, the feeling of being watched and not believed. He took a deep breath and told himself to shake it off. Today was a new day. He had school, friends, basketball practice again. Life didn't stop for one strange night. Downstairs, his mother was packing lunch and humming softly. She smiled when she saw him. "Morning, sweetheart." "You're up early." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, couldn't sleep much. You okay?" she asked, glancing at him for a second longer than usual. He hesitated. "Yeah, I'm fine." She didn't push. She handed him a sandwich wrapped neatly in foil. "Eat this on the way. Don't skip breakfast again." He nodded. "Thanks, Mom." His father was sitting at the table reading something on his tablet, a cup of coffee beside him. "Morning, champ," he said without looking up. "Morning, Dad. Big game Friday?" "Yes, son," the boy said, grabbing his backpack. "Coach says we're looking good." His father smiled slightly. "I know you are. Keep your head straight." He nodded again, half smiling. His father was always composed, the kind of man who didn't waste words. There was a quiet strength in how he carried himself. Calm, firm, never rushed. Everyone respected him. As the boy stepped outside, the morning air was crisp. The car still sat in the driveway. For a second, he stared at it, remembering the sound of the siren echoing off the houses. He ran his fingers along the back, over the small crack in the tail light. It really was broken. He made a mental note to ask his father to help fix it later. The drive to school was peaceful. Music played low. The sun brightened the streets, and he tried to focus on normal things. The math test, his friends' jokes, what shoes he might wear to the next game. But even as he smiled and waved to classmates, something deep inside him stayed tense, as if waiting for something else to go wrong. At lunch, his best friend noticed. "You good, man? You seem quiet today." "Yeah, just tired," he said. "You sure? You look like you didn't sleep." The boy shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Got stopped by the cops last night." "That's all." His friend's eyebrows shot up. "For what?" "Broken taillight, they said." "Man, they always got some reason." The boy nodded, not really wanting to talk more. He didn't want pity or attention. He wanted normal. After school, he stayed late for practice. The gym smelled like polished floors and sweat. The bouncing of the basketball, the sneakers squeaking, the coach shouting, all of it felt grounding. Here he knew what to do. Run, pass, shoot. It made sense. When practice ended, he felt lighter. Maybe tonight would be easier. Maybe he could finally stop replaying the moment in his head. But as he left the locker room, his coach called after him. "Hey, got a second?" He turned back. "Yes, coach. You're looking sharp lately," the coach said. "Keep it up. I think you've got a real shot for captain next season." The boy smiled genuinely for the first time that day. "Thank you, coach. I'll do my best." "Good, and tell your dad I said hello. Haven't seen him at the games lately." "Will do." The sun was setting as he drove home again. The light was soft and golden, just like last night. He turned on the same street, quiet, familiar. But when he glanced in the mirror, he saw another car following behind him. For a split second, his heart skipped. Not flashing lights, not a siren. Just a regular car. Still, he couldn't help feeling that same sting of fear. He shook his head and laughed softly at himself. "Relax," he whispered. When he reached home, he saw his father's car already parked. His father rarely got home early. Usually he was in meetings until late. That alone made the boy pause. Inside, the house felt calm but serious. His father was in his office, suit jacket off, glasses resting low on his nose. Papers were spread out across his desk. He looked up when his son stepped in. "Hey," he said. "How was school?" "It was fine. Practice went great." His father nodded, studying his face for a moment. "You sure everything's okay?" The boy froze slightly. "Yeah, why?" "You just look a little off." "Something happened?" He opened his mouth, then stopped. The words were there, ready to come out, but part of him didn't want to bring it up. Maybe it was pride. Maybe fear. Maybe both. "I got stopped last night," he said finally. His father's head lifted fully now. "Stopped? By who?" "The police. They said my taillight's broken." His father leaned back slowly, expression unreadable. "What time was this?" "After practice. Around 8, I think." His father's fingers tapped the desk lightly. "Did they give you a ticket?" "No, sir. They just checked things and told me to get it fixed." "And?" The boy hesitated again. "And that's it." "They were kind of rough, I guess. But they let me go." The room went quiet. His father's eyes didn't leave his. "Did they touch you?" "Not really. Just they were kind of angry. I don't know why." His father sighed quietly, removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Sit down." The boy sat in the chair across from him. "Listen," his father said slowly. "There are people out there who will look at you and see what they want to see, not who you really are. That's not fair, but it's the world we live in. You handled it right. You stayed calm. I'm proud of that." The boy nodded quietly. "Thanks, Dad. But," his father added, "next time if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. I don't care what time it is. You don't handle it alone." "That's not your job." The boy nodded again. "Okay." His father leaned back, his voice softer now. "You're a good kid. You don't deserve that kind of treatment. But don't let it harden you. You hear me?" "Yes, sir." "All right, go wash up." "Dinner's almost ready." The boy stood, feeling both comforted and unsettled. His father's calm voice always made him feel protected. But there was something in his tone tonight, something cold and restrained, like he was holding back anger. At dinner, the air felt slightly heavier. His mother noticed the silence but didn't ask questions. The boy kept glancing at his father, who ate quietly, lost in thought. Afterward, his father disappeared back into his office. The door closed softly. The boy went upstairs and sat by the window again. Outside, the same streetlights glowed, the same calm neighborhood sounds filled the air. But something had changed. He thought about what his father said about calling him next time. He wondered what his father would do if he had answered that call last night. His father wasn't just any man. People listened to him. He was respected, powerful even. But would that have mattered on that quiet street with 2 officers who didn't know who he was? Later that night, while brushing his teeth, he overheard his parents talking softly downstairs. "I can't believe it," his father said, voice low but firm. "They stopped him on our own street." His mother's voice was gentle. "He's safe now. That's what matters." "That's not the point," his father said. "It shouldn't have happened in the first place." The boy didn't hear the rest. He walked quietly back to his room, feeling a strange mix of pride and guilt. Pride that his father cared so fiercely. guilt that he had made him worry. The next few days went by quietly. School, practice, home, repeat. He fixed the taillight with his father's help that weekend. Everything seemed to settle back into routine, but something subtle lingered. His father started calling home more often, checking where he was. "You at school? You heading straight home after practice?" The questions were gentle but constant. One evening, the boy and his father sat in the garage fixing an old bike. It was their small weekend project. The radio played low and the smell of oil hung in the air. "Dad?" the boy said suddenly. "Yeah? Why do you think they stopped me, really?" His father paused, tightening a bolt slowly. "You said they told you the light was broken, right?" "Yeah, but I think they thought I looked suspicious," his father sighed. "That's possible. Because of the car?" "Because of a lot of things," his father said carefully. "People see what they expect to see." The boy nodded, not sure what to say. "I just didn't think it would happen here." His father gave a small, tired smile. "That's what everyone thinks until it does." They worked in silence for a while. The boy felt the weight of the words but didn't know how to respond. That night, his father stayed up late again, typing in his office. The boy could hear the faint clicks from down the hall. It was comforting in a way, that steady rhythm that always meant his father was in control. But beneath that calm surface, something else was stirring, something his father didn't say out loud. Because while the boy was trying to move on, his father was quietly looking into what happened. He'd already called a few people at the department, asked subtle questions, checked patrol records. He wanted to know who was on duty that night and why his son had been stopped. He told himself it was just curiosity, professional responsibility. But the truth was simpler. He was angry. Angry that his son had been made to feel small and afraid. Angry that even with all his power and position, he couldn't shield him from that moment. The boy didn't know any of this yet. To him, things were finally calm again. But the story wasn't finished. The quiet had only settled for a while, because one night, almost a week later, as he was leaving practice again, he noticed the same patrol car parked near the corner. The same lights. The same uneasy feeling. He swallowed, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe they were watching traffic. He drove slowly, keeping his eyes on the road, pretending not to notice. But as he turned down the next street, the car pulled out and followed. His hands tightened around the wheel. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't breaking any rules. Still, his pulse quickened. When the blue lights flashed behind him again, his heart dropped. He pulled over, his chest pounding. He looked at his phone sitting in the cup holder. This time he didn't hesitate. He picked it up, unlocked it with shaking hands, and scrolled to the first number on his list. When the line clicked and his father's voice came through, calm and steady as ever, the boy exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Dad," he said quietly, "it's happening again." The moment his father's voice came through the phone, everything around him seemed to pause. The flashing lights reflected against the windshield, painting streaks of red and blue across his face. His hands were trembling slightly as he held the phone close. "Where are you?" his father asked calmly, his voice firm but steady. "On Elm Street," the boy said quietly. "The same officers from last time, I think." "Stay in the car," his father said. Hands visible. "Don't argue. I'm coming." The line went silent for a second, then his father spoke again, lower and slower. "Put me on speaker. Leave it on the seat where they can hear." "Yes, sir." The boy placed the phone carefully on the seat beside him, still on speaker. He took a deep breath and rolled the window down halfway. The air outside was cool, and his heart felt like it was thudding against his ribs. The two officers approached, their flashlights glowing bright in the dark. One on each side of the car. The boy's fingers rested tightly on the steering wheel, knuckles pale from the pressure. "Evening," one of the officers said, voice clipped. "We meet again, huh?" "Yes, sir," the boy replied, his voice quiet but clear. "What's the rush tonight?" the other asked from the passenger side. "No rush, sir. Just heading home from practice." The first officer leaned down, shining the light inside the car. "We ran your plate. Wanted to make sure everything's in order this time." "It should be, sir. I fixed the taillight last week." His father's voice came softly through the phone speaker, controlled but unmistakably authoritative. "Officers, this is his father speaking. Please identify yourselves." The sound of that voice shifted the energy instantly. Both men froze, the flashlight beam flickering slightly as one officer adjusted his stance. The boy didn't move, watching their reactions from the corner of his eye. "Who's this?" one officer asked cautiously. "This is Judge Carter," his father said. His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. There was power in his calm. "My son is on his way home. I'd like to know why he's been stopped again." The officers exchanged a quick glance. The younger one straightened his posture, clearing his throat. "Sir, we were just running a plate check." "Routine patrol." "Routine?" The father repeated, still calm. "You stopped this same vehicle less than a week ago. The light issue was resolved. So what's routine about stopping a student twice on the same street?" Silence. The only sounds were the hum of the car engine and the faint chirp of crickets nearby. "Please step back from my son's window," the father continued. "I'm on my way now. Do not touch him, and do not raise your voice to him. I expect professional conduct." "Yes, sir," one of them said after a moment, his voice quieter now. The boy didn't speak. He just stared forward, his hand steady on the wheel, the glow from the dashboard lighting his face. A few minutes later, headlights appeared down the street. His father's car pulled up smoothly behind the patrol car, parking carefully. The boy saw him step out, tall, composed, wearing a dark suit though it was well past office hours. He walked toward them with a calm stride, the kind that carried quiet authority. The officer shifted uneasily. "Evening, gentlemen," his father said. His tone was polite, but there was steel underneath. "Which of you initiated the stop?" The older officer raised a hand slightly. "That would be me, sir." His father nodded once. "And the reason?" "Routine patrol, sir. Just verifying the vehicle registration." His father's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Registration that you could have checked by running the plate without detaining the driver." "Sir, it's standard practice to what?" His father asked evenly. "Stop a 17-year-old twice in 1 week for the same supposed reason?" The officer opened his mouth, then shut it again. The younger one looked down, avoiding eye contact. The father turned toward the car window. "You all right?" "Yes, sir," the boy said softly. "Good," his father said. "Step out, please." The boy got out slowly, standing beside his father. His father's hand rested briefly on his shoulder, just enough to ground him, to remind him he wasn't alone. "I'm taking my son home now," he said to the officers. "If you need to contact anyone, do so through my office. Good night." The officers didn't move for a moment. Then one of them muttered, "Yes, sir." As the father and son walked back to their car, the boy glanced once over his shoulder. The officers were still standing there, motionless in the flashing lights. Inside the car, as they drove off, silence hung heavy. The boy finally said, "I didn't think you'd get here so fast." His father's eyes stayed on the road. "I was nearby, and I've been expecting that call since last week." The boy looked out the window, the houses passing in a blur. "They didn't hurt me or anything." "I know," his father said quietly. "But they could have." The boy's throat tightened. "Why does it have to be like this?" His father sighed, the sound low and tired. "Because some people see a uniform and forget their responsibility. Others see skin color and forget someone's humanity." They drove in silence for a while. The boy kept thinking about the look on the officers' faces when they heard his father's name. The sudden shift. The fear or maybe respect, and he couldn't tell which. "I didn't want to call you," the boy said finally. "I didn't want to bother you." His father gave a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You could never bother me. Not with that." When they got home, his mother was waiting at the door, worry etched across her face. "What happened?" "Nothing serious," the father said calmly. "It's handled." But she could tell from his tone that handled didn't mean forgotten. The boy went to his room, sat on the edge of his bed, and tried to slow his breathing. The fear had faded, but something else had taken its place. A strange mix of anger and disbelief. It wasn't just what happened. It was the look in their eyes before they realized who his father was. He picked up his phone, scrolling aimlessly. Texts from friends, messages from his coach, nothing out of the ordinary. The world kept spinning as if nothing had happened. Downstairs, his father was on the phone. His voice was low, professional. "Yes, I need to know who was on patrol on Elm tonight. 2 officers, possibly the same from last Thursday." He paused. "Yes, I'm aware. This is not about special treatment. It's about accountability." He listened for a long moment, then said, "Thank you. Send me the report by morning." When he hung up, he sat in silence for a while, staring at the papers on his desk. His face was calm, but his eyes showed something deeper: disappointment, frustration, and a quiet determination that had nothing to do with pride and everything to do with love. The next morning, the boy found him at the breakfast table, dressed sharply, briefcase by his side. "Heading to work already?" he asked. "Yes," his father said, taking a sip of coffee. "There's something I need to look into." The boy hesitated. "About last night?" His father nodded once. "It won't happen again." At school, everything felt strange. He smiled when people talked to him, but part of his mind was somewhere else. On that quiet street, the phone on the seat, his father's voice cutting through the tension like a shield. That moment had changed something inside him, not just the fear, something deeper. For the first time, he saw his father not just as the man who gave advice and worked late, but as someone who carried a weight far heavier than he realized. That evening, when his father came home, the boy was waiting in the living room. "Did you find out anything?" he asked. His father nodded. "Yes, I spoke with their supervisor." "They'll be questioned." The boy frowned. "Are they in trouble?" "Not yet," his father said. "But they'll have to explain their actions." The boy hesitated. "I don't want to make it worse for anyone." His father's eyes softened. "You're not making it worse. You're making it right. That's not the same thing." The boy nodded slowly, thinking it over. "They looked scared when they heard your name." His father gave a short, dry laugh. "Good. Maybe they'll remember it next time they think about pulling someone over for no reason." Then his tone softened again. "You did everything right. I'm proud of you." That night he slept better than he had in days. The nightmare that had been haunting him, flashing lights, sharp voices, didn't come this time. Instead, he dreamed of walking down a quiet street under clear skies. No lights, no sirens, just peace. The next day, when he got home from school, his father wasn't there. A note on the counter said, "Late meeting. Don't wait up." He made himself a sandwich and sat on the couch, turning on the TV. But the local news caught his attention. A brief segment showed his father speaking at a press conference. The caption read, "County Legal Chief Addresses Misconduct Investigation." He sat up straight, volume low, listening. His father was composed as always, but the words carried weight. "No one, regardless of age or background, should feel unsafe during a routine stop. We hold our officers to the highest standard of respect and accountability." Reporters shouted questions, but his father just nodded politely and walked away. The boy sat there, stunned. His father hadn't mentioned he was going to speak publicly. He didn't know whether to feel proud or worried. Maybe both. When his father came home late that night, the boy was still awake, waiting. "You were on TV," he said quietly. His father smiled faintly. "I suppose you saw that. Was it about me?" "Not directly," his father said. "But yes, it started because of what happened." The boy looked down. "I didn't mean to cause all this." His father shook his head. "You didn't cause it. You revealed it." The boy thought about that for a long moment. Then he asked softly, "Will those officers lose their jobs?" His father's expression turned thoughtful. "Maybe, maybe not. The point isn't punishment. It's awareness. Change starts when people know they're being watched, when they realize someone is paying attention." The boy nodded slowly, understanding. That night, as he lay in bed, he felt something new. Not fear, not anger, but a quiet sense of power. Not the kind that comes from status or titles, but from truth. He realized that his father's real strength wasn't his position or his authority. It was his calm, his reason, his refusal to let fear control the story. And for the first time, the boy wanted to be like that, not loud, not angry, but steady, unshakable. The next morning, he stood in front of the mirror, straightening his school shirt. His reflection looked the same, but he felt different inside. The world outside hadn't changed overnight. The same cars passed, the same people went about their day. But now he walked with a little more confidence, a little more awareness of who he was, and who stood behind him. He didn't know what would come next. Maybe questions, maybe gossip, maybe more attention than he wanted. But one thing was certain. He wasn't afraid anymore. The call he made that night hadn't just brought his father to his side. It had opened something in both of them, a bridge between fear and strength, between silence and truth, and deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Days passed after the press conference, but the feeling around the house didn't fade. The boy could sense it in small ways. The way his father seemed quieter at breakfast. The way his mother lingered near the window each night, watching cars go by. At school, whispers had started to spread. Someone must have seen the news because by Wednesday a few students were already talking. "Hey, was that your dad on TV?" One of them asked in the hallway, half curious, half amazed. "Yeah," the boy said simply. "That's wild," another said. "I didn't know your dad was like the legal chief or something." He gave a small smile. "He doesn't really talk about it." They nodded, impressed but unsure what to say next. The topic shifted to something else, but the boy could still feel their eyes following him. He wasn't sure if it was admiration or discomfort. Maybe both. Later that day, a teacher asked him to stay after class. She was kind, one of the few adults he trusted completely. "I saw the press conference," she said gently. "That must have been a lot for you." He shrugged. "It's fine. I'm just trying not to think about it." She nodded. "Sometimes pretending things don't bother us is easier. But you handled yourself really well." Her tone was warm, and it made something tighten in his chest. Gratitude, maybe. "Thanks," he said quietly. After school, he walked home instead of taking the bus. The air was cool, the sky pale with sunset. Every sound felt sharper. Footsteps passing cars, the rustle of leaves. When he got home, his father's car was already in the driveway. Inside, the atmosphere felt heavy again. Papers were spread across the kitchen table, and his father sat there with a serious look, glasses low on his nose. "You're home early," the boy said. His father looked up, managing a faint smile. "Yes, I had to review some statements." "From the officers?" His father nodded. "They've been placed on leave while the department reviews the incident." The boy hesitated. "Are they mad at us?" "Maybe," his father said. "But this isn't about anger. It's about responsibility." He set his pen down and leaned back in his chair. "You know, most people think power comes from shouting the loudest. But real power is quiet. It's what makes people stop and think before they act." The boy thought about that. "Is that what you did at the press conference?" His father smiled slightly. "Something like that." For a while they sat in silence. The boy looked at the papers on the table. Reports, transcripts, statements written in neat official language. To anyone else it would look like paperwork, but to him it felt personal. "Do you think they'll change?" he asked softly. His father didn't answer right away. "Some might. Others won't. But change doesn't always start with everyone. It starts with one person who decides to do better." That night the boy couldn't sleep. His mind kept drifting back to that night. The flashing lights, the cold air, the sound of his father's voice over the speaker. He'd replayed it in his head so many times, and now it felt like a story that belonged to someone else. The next morning, while getting ready for school, he found his father's office door open. His father was on a video call, his voice calm but serious. "Yes," he was saying. "We'll start an independent review. I'll appoint an oversight committee by next week." He paused, listening. "No, this isn't about blame. It's about fairness. On both sides." The boy quietly stepped back, closing the door halfway. That afternoon, news vans appeared outside the courthouse downtown. Reporters waited by the steps, microphones ready. The boy watched it on TV from home. His father stood in front of them again, surrounded by flashing cameras. "This community deserves transparency," he said, "and every officer deserves proper training and accountability. We will not tolerate bias, but we also will not act on anger. We will act on truth." The boy felt a rush of pride, but he also felt something else, a quiet fear. He knew not everyone would take his father's words kindly. That weekend, he went with his parents to the grocery store. It was supposed to be a simple trip, just to pick up dinner things. But as they walked through the aisles, he noticed a few people whispering, glancing at them. One man nodded respectfully at his father. "Good job on the news, sir. About time someone said something." Another, standing near the checkout line, muttered under his breath, "All for the cameras." His father heard it, but didn't react. He just kept walking, steady and composed. In the car afterward, the boy finally asked, "Doesn't it bother you when people say stuff like that?" His father smiled faintly. "If I let every whisper bother me, I'd never get anything done. The truth doesn't need everyone to agree, it just needs time to stand." His mother reached over, placing a hand on his father's arm. "Still, it's not easy." "No," his father admitted softly. But it's worth it. That night after dinner, the boy sat on the porch listening to the quiet hum of crickets. His father joined him a few minutes later holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "You've been quiet lately," his father said, handing him one. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About everything," the boy said. "How one night can change so much." His father nodded slowly. "It's strange, isn't it? How moments you don't plan end up defining who you become." They sat in silence for a while. The streetlight flickered softly and the world felt calm for the first time in weeks. Then his father said, "You know, when I first got this job, I promised myself I'd never use it for personal matters. But that night, that was different. That was my son." The boy looked at him. "Did you ever think about not saying anything?" His father nodded. "For a second. But silence helps no one. If we want fairness, we have to speak up. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who can't." The boy took a sip of cocoa, the warmth spreading through him. "Do you think people will actually listen?" His father smiled softly. "Some will. Others will take longer. But eventually, truth has a way of finding its voice." The days turned into weeks, and slowly the storm began to settle. The news stopped running stories about the case. The reporters moved on. But the echoes of what happened remained. At school, things changed too. A few teachers started including discussions about fairness and empathy in class. One day, a police officer came to speak about respect and community trust. The boy sat quietly at the back, listening. The officer, not one of the men from that night, spoke honestly. "We're human," he said. "We make mistakes. But we also have the chance to learn. Real strength isn't pretending to be perfect. It's owning up when we're not." Those words stayed with him. After the assembly, the officer spotted him and came over. "You're Judge Carter's son, right?" "Yes, sir," the boy said carefully. The man smiled kindly. "He's doing good work. And so are you, just by being here." The boy didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. That evening, when he told his father about it, his father smiled. "That's what change looks like, small, steady steps." "But it's still slow," the boy said. "It always is," his father replied. "But slow change lasts longer." By now, things at home were starting to feel normal again. Dinner talk returned to simple things: school, work, funny news stories. But underneath it all, there was still that quiet understanding that they had lived through something that left a mark, even if no one talked about it anymore. One Friday night, the boy's father came home later than usual. He looked tired but satisfied. "I had a meeting with the new training board," he said. "We're setting up community workshops. People will get to share their stories directly with the department." "That's good," his wife said. "It's a start," he replied. The boy smiled. "Can I come to one?" His father looked at him for a moment, surprised. "If you want to, yes, I do," the boy said. "I just want to understand how people see things. Both sides." His father gave a small nod, pride flickering in his eyes. "That's the best reason to go." The next week, the workshop was held in the town community center. Rows of chairs filled the room. Officers, residents, students, people from every background sat together, listening, sharing. When it was his turn to speak, the boy hesitated at first. But his father gave him an encouraging nod. He stood up slowly, hands in his pockets. "I didn't plan to talk tonight," he began, "but I guess I should." He looked around the room, his voice steady but quiet. "A few weeks ago, something happened to me that made me scared. I thought people only saw what I looked like, not who I was. But that night also showed me that not everyone's the same. Some people care. Some people listen. And that's what matters." He paused, eyes meeting those of a few officers sitting in the front row. "I just hope we all try harder to see people, not labels." When he sat back down, the room was silent for a few seconds. Then people started clapping softly. His father gave him a look that said more than words ever could. Afterward, as they walked to the car, the boy said, "That felt weird." "Good weird or bad weird?" his father asked. He smiled. "Good weird," his father chuckled. "That's how growth feels sometimes." The next morning, the local paper ran a small piece about the event. The headline read, "Community Voices Lead the Way in Police Reform." There was a picture, not of his father, but of the boy standing at the microphone. When he saw it, he laughed in disbelief. "They actually put that in the paper?" His father grinned. "Looks like you're the one leading change now." He shook his head, embarrassed but secretly proud. "I just said what I felt. And that," his father said, "is exactly what makes it powerful." As weeks turned into months, The memory of that night became something different. Not a wound, but a lesson. He still remembered the fear, the flashing lights, the uncertainty. But now those memories were surrounded by something stronger. Courage, awareness, and hope. One evening, as they sat on the porch again, his father looked at him and said quietly, "You've grown a lot through all this." The boy smiled. "I had a good teacher." His father chuckled softly. "Maybe we both learned something. What's that?" "That change doesn't start in courtrooms," he said. "It starts in moments like this, when people choose to care instead of turning away." The boy nodded, feeling the truth of it settle deep inside him. The world around them was still imperfect, still complicated. But now it felt possible, like every person had the power to shift things, even just a little, and in that quiet evening light with his father beside him, he realized that what began as a night of fear had become something else entirely. A story of understanding, courage, and love strong enough to outshine flashing lights. Months passed, and life began to find its rhythm again. The air felt lighter now, though traces of what had happened still lingered quietly in small ways. In looks exchanged, in memories that surfaced when the nights got too quiet. The boy had changed, and everyone could see it. His teachers noticed the calm way he handled pressure now, the way he spoke with more thought, more confidence. Even his friends said he seemed different, but it wasn't just him. His father had changed too. He still worked long hours, but there was a new spark in him, a kind of quiet purpose that guided everything he did. His mother noticed it most of all. "You don't look as tired anymore," she told him one morning while pouring coffee. He smiled faintly, maybe because I'm finally doing what I should have done years ago. "You've always done your best," she said softly. He looked at her, eyes gentle. "Now I'm doing what matters most." At school, the boy was invited to speak at a community event organized by local youth leaders. He hesitated at first. Public speaking wasn't something he enjoyed. But when he told his father, he saw the look of quiet pride on his face and couldn't say no. The day of the event came with a clear sky and warm air. The community center was packed. Students, parents, teachers, even a few officers in plain clothes. He stood backstage, hands slightly trembling, staring at the microphone waiting for him. His father stood nearby, a reassuring presence. "Nervous?" "A little," the boy admitted. "That's good," his father said with a smile. "It means you care about what you're saying." When his name was called, he took a deep breath and stepped forward. The room fell quiet. For a moment, he thought about walking off the stage. But then he looked out and saw his father in the front row, sitting tall, eyes steady on him. That was enough. He spoke slowly, his voice steady. "A while ago, something happened that changed the way I see the world. It was scary and it made me angry at first, but it also made me realize something important, that the way we respond to fear matters more than the fear itself." He looked around the room. That night could have gone differently. It could have ended badly, but it didn't, because someone stayed calm. My dad reminded me that calm doesn't mean weak. It means strong enough to stay human when it's hardest to. The audience listened quietly, some nodding, others with thoughtful expressions. He continued, "What happened to me isn't just about me. It's about how we all look at each other. Sometimes people don't see who we are. They see what they expect to see. And maybe we can't change everyone's mind overnight, but we can change how we treat people one moment at a time." He paused, taking another breath. "That's what my father taught me. That power isn't in shouting or fighting. It's in how you stand when everything around you is unfair. It's in choosing peace when you could choose anger." He finished with a small smile. And maybe if enough of us choose that, things really will start to change. When he stepped back, the room erupted in gentle applause. Not loud or forced, but warm, real. His father stood up, clapping with everyone else, pride shining in his eyes. After the event, people came up to talk to him. Some thanked him. Others just smiled. An officer approached him too, one of the younger ones who had attended the earlier workshops. "You spoke really well," the officer said. "I think your story opened a lot of eyes." "Thank you," the boy said quietly. "I mean it," the officer added. "It's easy to forget the human side of things. Hearing it from you makes a difference." The boy nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and hope. That's all I wanted. Later that night at home, his father found him sitting on the porch again. the same spot where they'd had so many quiet talks. "You were amazing today," his father said, taking a seat beside him. The boy smiled shyly. "I just said what I felt. That's what makes it powerful," his father said. "Truth doesn't need fancy words." For a while, they sat in comfortable silence watching the streetlights flicker. The boy spoke softly, almost to himself. "Do you think people will remember what I said?" His father looked at him with a thoughtful smile. "Maybe not everyone, but the right people will. And sometimes that's enough to start something bigger." Weeks turned into months again, and the ripples of that night, the one that had started everything, continued spreading quietly. The town's police department introduced new community programs. Officers began spending more time in schools, not for discipline but for conversation. One day during lunch at school, the boy saw a familiar face, one of the officers from that night. He was standing near the front office talking to the principal. For a moment, the boy froze. He hadn't seen him since that night, and his stomach tightened without warning. But when the officer turned and saw him, his expression wasn't cold. It was regretful. The man walked over slowly. "Hey," he said quietly. "Can I talk to you for a second?" The boy nodded cautiously. The officer looked down for a moment, then met his eyes. "I wanted to say something. I owe you an apology for that night." The boy didn't say anything at first. The words caught him off guard. The officer continued, his voice steady but sincere. "I acted out of assumption. I didn't think. That wasn't right. I've been through a lot of training since then, and I see it differently now. You didn't deserve that." The boy swallowed hard. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I know it doesn't change what happened," the officer said, "but I wanted you to hear it from me." The boy nodded again. "I appreciate it." There was a long pause. Then the officer gave a small nod and walked away. The boy stood there processing what had just happened. He didn't feel angry or triumphant, just lighter, like something he didn't realize he'd been carrying had finally lifted. That evening, when he told his father, there was a long silence. His father finally said, "That takes courage, Dean, on both sides." The boy nodded. "It felt strange, but good." His father smiled softly. Forgiveness often does. That night, the boy sat at his desk, staring out the window at the stars. He thought about how far things had come, from fear to understanding, from silence to truth, and for the first time he realized something simple but powerful. The story wasn't about what had been done to him. It was about what they all chose to do afterward. Months later, during a community recognition ceremony, his father was invited to speak again. But this time, he brought his son with him. When they stood on stage together, the applause felt different. Not for power, not for position, but for hope. His father spoke briefly. "Sometimes change begins not with leaders or laws, but with moments that test our humanity." My son reminded me of that. He reminded me that courage can be quiet, and that sometimes the smallest voices echo the loudest. He looked at his son and smiled. "This is not just my story. It's ours." Afterward, people came up to shake their hands, to thank them, to tell them how much their story had meant. The boy listened politely, but deep down he felt something more. Peace. As they drove home that night, the streets felt calm. The same street where everything had happened months ago looked different now, not because it had changed, but because they had. The boy looked out the window at the passing lights. "Do you ever think about that night anymore?" he asked softly. His father kept his eyes on the road. "Sometimes, but not with anger. I think of it as a reminder of how fragile things can be and how strong we can become when we stand together." The boy nodded slowly. "Me too." They pulled into the driveway. The porch light was on, warm and familiar. His mother stood at the door, smiling as they got out. Inside, the house felt safe, not because it was quiet, but because it was filled with something stronger than silence, understanding. Later, as he lay in bed, the boy thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the press conference, the workshops, the apology. It all felt like a lifetime compressed into a few months. He realized that stories like his didn't always end perfectly, but they could end with growth, with learning, with something real, and that was enough. He closed his eyes, hearing his father's words echo softly in his mind. "Real power is quiet. It's what makes people stop and think before they act. And with that thought, he drifted to sleep, not afraid anymore, but grateful. Grateful that a single phone call made in fear had led to something far bigger than either of them had imagined. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window. Life went on, ordinary and peaceful. He walked downstairs, the smell of breakfast filling the air. His father was reading the paper, his mother humming softly by the stove. "Morning," he said. His father looked up and smiled. "Morning, son." It was a simple exchange, but it carried everything. Trust, love, and the kind of understanding that only comes after walking through fire and finding light on the other side. As he sat down, the boy realized something he hadn't before, that strength wasn't just about standing up when things went wrong. It was also about moving forward when they finally went right, and that's exactly what they did. They moved forward, together, wiser, stronger, and unafraid. The story that began with flashing lights and fear ended with calm and connection. Not because the world had changed completely, but because they had. And in that small corner of the world, on that quiet street, something truly powerful had happened. A reminder that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks softly, through the steady voice of a father and the unbroken heart of a son. Time passed, and the story that had once shaken their lives began to settle quietly into memory. Seasons changed, school terms came and went, and the days seemed calmer now. Yet even in the peace, something deeper had taken root. A quiet understanding that life could change in an instant. And that strength sometimes meant choosing peace over pride. The boy was older now, taller, more thoughtful. He didn't talk about that night much anymore, but it was still there, not as a wound, but as a lesson. It lived in the way he treated people, in how he paused before judging and how he listened before speaking. His father noticed it often. Watching him from across the dinner table, he saw a steadiness that hadn't been there before. One evening, while his father was finishing up work in the study, the boy knocked lightly on the door. "Got a minute?" he asked. His father looked up, smiling. "Always. Come in." The boy sat down, glancing at the piles of papers spread across the desk. "Still working on those community programs?" His father nodded. "Yes, we've been expanding them to nearby towns. It's slow, but it's working." "That's good," the boy said. "A lot's changed since that night." His father leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "Yes, it has. You've changed too." The boy smiled faintly. "I had to." His father nodded, understanding. "Sometimes the hardest moments make us grow faster than we want to." They sat quietly for a moment, the ticking of the clock filling the room. Then the boy said softly, "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" His father looked at him carefully. "I wish you never had to feel fear like that. But I don't wish away the lessons. Some truths only come when life pushes us." The boy nodded slowly, thinking about it. "It made me see how unfair things can be, but it also showed me how much one person can do." His father smiled, pride flickering in his eyes. "That's exactly it." The next weekend, they attended a regional youth conference focused on fairness and leadership. It was held at a nearby college campus, a place filled with energy, ideas, and hope. The boy didn't know why his father wanted him there at first, but once he walked in and saw the crowd, hundreds of young people sharing their stories, teachers guiding discussions, he understood. It wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what came next. A panel discussion began in the main hall. His father sat at the center table, invited as a guest speaker. He spoke not as an authority figure, but as a parent. He said, "True change doesn't start in offices or meetings. It begins in homes, in conversations between parents and children, in the courage to speak honestly about what's wrong and what must be made right." The audience listened closely. Some nodded, some wiped quiet tears. The boy sat in the audience, his chest swelling with pride. He realized that his father's calm voice had a power far beyond the courtroom. It carried hope. After the talk, students and community leaders came to shake his father's hand. Some asked questions, others just said thank you. The boy stood off to the side, smiling quietly. He didn't need the spotlight. Watching his father was enough. Later that day, as they walked to the car, his father said, "You know, I used to think leadership meant speaking for people, but now I see it's more about listening to them." The boy nodded. "That's what you've been teaching everyone, right?" His father chuckled. Maybe, but I think you taught me first. At home, life went on. The town moved forward, slowly healing from old divides. The boy noticed how people greeted his father differently now, with more respect, sometimes even gratitude. One afternoon, while helping his father organize files, he came across a letter. It was folded neatly inside an envelope marked personal. "What's this?" he asked. His father looked up, then smiled softly. "That's from one of the officers involved in your stop." The boy blinked. "Another letter?" "Yes," his father said. "He wrote to apologize formally. Said he's now mentoring new recruits to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen again." The boy stared at the letter, unsure what to feel. "Do you believe him?" His father nodded. "I do. People can change when they face truth honestly." The boy smiled faintly. "That's good to know." That night he couldn't stop thinking about it. He realized that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about facing what hurt you, and choosing to move forward anyway. In the months that followed, he started volunteering at some of the same workshops his father had created. At first he just helped with small tasks, setting up chairs, handing out pamphlets. But gradually people began asking him to speak. His words weren't rehearsed or fancy. They were simple, honest, real. He'd say, "Everyone has a story that shapes how they see the world, but it's not just what happens to us that matters, and it's what we do with it afterward." People listened. Some came up afterward to thank him. Others shared their own stories. Moments when they had felt unseen, moments when they found courage anyway. His father would watch from the back of the room, pride in his eyes but humility in his heart. One evening, after a long day of community work, they walked home together through the park. The air was cool, filled with the sound of crickets. His father said quietly, "You've come a long way, son." The boy smiled. "You too," his father laughed softly. "I suppose we both grew up through it." They reached a bench overlooking a small pond, the water reflecting the glow of nearby streetlights. They sat down, and for a long moment neither spoke. Finally, the boy said, "I think I understand now." That night wasn't just about what happened. It was about what it started. His father nodded slowly. "Exactly. Sometimes the worst moments plant the seeds for the best change." They sat there in silence, watching the ripples move gently across the water. Over the next few years, the boy's story continued to spread quietly, not through the news but through people. Teachers used it as an example of courage in classrooms. Community groups mentioned it in meetings. It became less about one event and more about a message, that fairness begins with understanding. By the time he finished high school, he was already known in his town as someone who spoke with wisdom beyond his age. He didn't try to be a leader, but people naturally listened when he did speak. At his graduation ceremony, his father sat in the front row, eyes glistening with pride. When the boy walked across the stage, there was a moment when their eyes met, a silent exchange of everything they'd been through together. After the ceremony, his father hugged him tightly. "You made it," he said. "We made it," the boy replied. They laughed softly, the kind of laugh that comes when words aren't enough. Later that summer, before leaving for college, the boy and his father took a quiet drive down the same street where everything had happened. The air was warm, the trees full and green. The street looked peaceful, ordinary, nothing like the place it had once been in their memories. They pulled over for a moment, sitting in silence. "It looks smaller now," the boy said quietly. His father smiled. "That's because you're bigger now, not just in height but in understanding." The boy nodded, eyes thoughtful. "I guess you're right." They sat there for a few minutes, then drove on. When the boy left for college later that year, his father stood at the train station, waving as the train pulled away. The boy watched him through the window, the same calm figure who had once stood between him and fear, now standing as a symbol of everything he wanted to become. At school, the boy studied law just like his father, not because he was told to, but because he wanted to understand justice in his own way. He wanted to help people feel safe, seen, and heard, the way his father had helped him. He called home often, sharing stories about classes, professors, and new friends. And every time, his father's voice carried that same steady warmth. "I'm proud of you," he'd always say. And the boy, now a young man, would always smile and answer, "I learned from the best." Years later, when he graduated from college, he came home to visit. His father had aged a little, a few more lines around his eyes, a bit more gray in his hair. But his presence was still as strong as ever. They sat together on the porch again, watching another sunset, just like they used to. The son turned to him and said quietly, "You know, I used to think that night was the worst thing that could have happened to me. But now I see it differently." His father looked at him. "How do you see it now?" The son smiled. "As the night that taught me who I really was and who you are too." His father's eyes softened. "That's a good way to see it." They sat in silence for a while, the air warm and filled with memories. The world around them had changed, slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. People spoke more openly about fairness, kindness, and trust. Their town became a small example of what was possible when people chose understanding over anger. As the sun dipped below the horizon, his father said softly, "It's strange, isn't it? How something that started with fear ended with hope." The son nodded, smiling faintly. "I think that's what makes it worth remembering." His father looked out at the fading light. "Promise me something." "What's that?" "No matter where you go or what you do, stay true to what you learned. That calm can be stronger than power, and kindness can be braver than anger." The son nodded. "I promise." They sat there until the sky turned dark, the air filled with quiet peace, and as the stars began to appear, the story that once began with flashing lights found its quiet ending, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in the steady rhythm of two hearts that had learned to face the world together, one lesson, one choice, one moment at a time. The night that once brought fear had now become the memory that brought strength, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories aren't shouted or celebrated. They're lived quietly, through the people who refuse to let darkness have the last word.